Good evening. I'm David Rubin, the Brown Foundation Curator of Contemporary Art, and welcome to a conversation with Daniel Pinchbeck. Before we begin tonight's program, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors of the psychedelic exhibition and programs such as tonight's program. We're very grateful for the support from SAMA Contemporaries and all the members of SAMA Contemporaries. We're extremely grateful to Jerry Gore for his support of this project and the programming, and to the Toby Devin Lewis Philanthropic Fund of the Jewish Community Federation of Cleveland. A few announcements of upcoming events. 2 weeks from tonight, on April 27th, our guest for our conversation will be Richard Anaskevich, the pioneer op artist who was included in the 1965 Responsive Eye exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art. On May 4th, it will be my privilege to hold a conversation here with Alex Gray, whose work I'm sure you all know. On May 11th, we will be screening the film Waking Life, which was actually made in Austin and deals with a psychedelic sensibility in an animated format. And on June 8th, I will be holding a panel discussion here with 5 of the artists in the exhibition: George Cisneros, James Cobb, Mark Hoganson, Constance Lowe, and Alex Rubio. So please join us on June 8th for that. And before I introduce Daniel, I also want to mention that following tonight's conversation, Daniel will be signing books just outside the auditorium door. So if you brought your book, if you're going to buy some books tonight, he'd be happy to sign them for you. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Daniel Pinchbeck, who is the author of Breaking Open the Head, a psychedelic journey into the heart of contemporary shamanism, and 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl. Daniel has written features for the New York Times Magazine, Esquire, Harper's Bazaar, Rolling Stone, Art Forum, and Art News, among other publications. He has been a columnist for the Art newspaper, which is based in London, and an editor at Connoisseur magazine. He is currently the editorial director of 2 website projects, which we'll learn more about tonight, realitysandwich.com and evolver.net. So now, Daniel, let's begin our dialogue. So, let's move this forward one. That's not cool. Daniel, you grew up in a very artistic family, and so I thought it might be interesting to begin by asking you to tell us a little bit about your background growing up with an artist for a father and a writer for a mother. So this is what your father's art looked like, of course. Could you tell us a little bit about him and what the environment was for you? Because I'm sure that played a role in your own development.
Yeah, I was born in New York City in the 60s, and when I was first a child, my parents were living on St. Mark's Place. My mother was a book editor and an author, and my father was an abstract sculptor and a painter. He was kind of connected to the minimalist movement for a while, and then his work became more kind of gestural and expressive. And we lived for a while on a loft on Green Street, one of those big industrial lofts.
Right in the heart of Soho.
In Soho, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Where he actually lived until he died in 2000.
Did you paint at all when you were growing up, or make artwork?
I not so much. I mean, maybe a little bit, but I was always more attracted to the writing, which, as I said, was my mother's kind of bailiwick. You know.
All right, well then maybe we should move on, and I'm not sure if this thing is working. Oh, you know what? I think I have to turn it on. It is on. Okay, here we go. Your mother, Joyce Johnson, is a writer, and tell us a little bit about the book of hers that we have on the screen.
Yeah, she's an author of several books. This is her most well-known book. It's called Minor Characters, and it's a memoir. When she was 21 years old, she became part of the kind of beat movement in New York around Columbia and Barnard and so on, and she actually ended up making friends with Allen Ginsberg, and through Ginsberg she met Jack Kerouac, and they had a relationship for, on and off again for maybe a year and a half. And she was actually with him when On the Road came out in 1957, which was kind of culturally defining moment for that generation, and for him kind of a triumph and tragedy, because he had been waiting a long time. He'd written the book in '49. It took like 8 years for him to get it published. He'd been living, very, very, very poor, just kind of traveling around, sometimes on railways or living on friends' couches or whatever. And suddenly he was catapulted into this fame and celebrity with this incredibly kind of positive New York Times review that said the book was brilliant, that he was kind of like the avatar for his generation, and he kind of couldn't handle that. I mean, he was already a kind of drinker, and so he became much more alcoholic, and started. She would be with him when he would go on these early TV talk shows, totally drunk and kind of out of control by television standards.
So, when did you first learn about your mother's relationship with Kerouac? How old were you?
I don't know exactly. I mean, Allen Ginsberg was part of our lives when I was a child, and I knew him a bit, and always really had a lot of respect for him, actually.
Did you have conversations with him?
I did, yeah. And then when I was a little bit older, when I was a young adult, I lived in the East Village. I would meet him sometimes for Chinese food and talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when did you really do your very first writing, would you say?
I mean, I was always writing. I mean, I had edited a literary magazine in high school, and it was always kind of the focus of my interest.
Okay. So that really brings us to the reason we're here tonight, is to talk about your recent and current work as a writer. And of course, we're thrilled that you accepted our invitation to contribute an essay to our book in conjunction with the psychedelic exhibition. But one of the reasons we went to ask you in the first place was, of course, because of your critically acclaimed book, Breaking Open the Head. Why don't you maybe first summarize what the book is about, and then I'll ask you some more sort of about what led you in that direction.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, although my parents were artists and kind of intellectuals, they were, in a kind of secular materialist context where they had rejected the